The year was 1980. I was 15 years old, growing up in rural New Zealand, 1,000 miles from anywhere. Well, musically speaking at least. Little did I know that on February 29th of that year, what has become one of Australia's most important and iconic rock bands took the stage at the Bondi Lifesaver in Sydney. If you're unfortunate enough to live outside of Australia or New Zealand, there's a really good chance you've never even heard of Cold Chisel. So I invite you to keep watching. I'm the world's worst musician, and this is my review of Cold Chisel, live at the Bondi Lifesaver, February 29th, 1980. Now, before we go any further, I should point out that it wasn't much longer after this gig that a friend of mine introduced me to Cold Chisel, and so started a lifelong love affair with this band and everything they produced. So it may be a little difficult for me to remain subjective on this one. One of their songs resonated with me so much, I even had my favourite line from it tattooed right here on my arm. But hey, who needs that sentimental bullshit anyway? I remember the night like it was yesterday. I was 15 years old, trying to impress girls at a party, having drunk a fair amount of beer, which I wasn't even legally old enough to drink yet, and someone put on the new single by Cold Chisel. It was actually a cover song, a version of Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Door. Any interest I had in the local girls that night was soon replaced by an instant love of Jimmy's voice and Mossy's amazing guitar playing. I was hooked on Chisel for the rest of my life. After repeatedly playing that song over and over, I was soon kicked out of the party and told to take the damn record with me. I played that 45 until it was toast, as well as the B-side, which ironically was The Party's Over. Now, 40 years on, I'm as big a fan as I ever was. And once, I even got to spend a week on the road with Mossy. But that's a story for another day. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear it. 3 days before the band was booked to go into the studio to record what would be their third and one of their biggest selling albums of all time, East, Cold Chisel had a gig at an iconic venue called the Bondi Lifesaver in Sydney. The Lifesaver had played host to every big touring band in the country and a few internationals as well. AC/DC, Rose Tattoo, the Skyhooks, Little River Band, they all treaded the boards at that place. But 6 months after the Chisel show, the final curtain fell. It would be silence forever. It was torn down and the only thing left was dust and memories. Thankfully, that night in 1980, despite the booze and no doubt other mind-altering substances, someone had the foresight to hit record on the tape machine. And over 40 years later, the tapes have resurfaced. Unfortunately, the tapes had fallen victim to time, like all things eventually do, and they had to be baked in an audio oven to reduce the buildup of oxide that had occurred over the last 4 decades. But thankfully they were able to be saved and remixed in the digital world. The recording of that night features 24 songs that went on to become etched in the memories of every Australian that grew up in the 80s and 90s, and well, quite a few Kiwis as well. The set includes hits like Breakfast at Sweetheart's, Standing on the Outside, The Star Hotel, Four Walls, and what has become the unofficial Australian national anthem, Khe-Sanh, as well as the song that affected me so much in my youth, Heaven's Door. Now, as the band was just about to begin recording East, in just a few days, they were testing out new material. Songs like Choir Girl and My Baby, which we have all heard 1,000 times today, were brand new back then. They were still under development, and you can hear it in the performance. If you're a fan of the band, you may be forgiven for asking why you need to buy this album. I mean, you probably have other recordings of these songs already. Well, the thing is, this is a record of a band at their peak. The songwriting was unequaled by any other band in the country at the time. This particular show was delivered with the kind of energy that only rock bands of the 80s could deliver. Barnes was at his vocal best, a bottle of vodka in one hand, microphone in the other, headband on to keep the sweat out of his eyes, and a few hundred fans trying to scream louder than he could. Back in those days, bands didn't have to deal with constant noise complaints, being told to turn down all the time like they do today, so Mossy was able to crank his Marshall to that sweet spot, the spot on the volume pot that made those amps famous. That spot is number 11. Phil Small on bass, Steve Presswich on drums were a thumping tight unit, and of course the unmistakable keyboard playing of Don Walker glued the whole thing together. And when you consider Don was only 29 years old at the time, his songwriting is incredible, and he speaks of experiences voices of someone who has lived 1,000 lives. This recording is important because it captures a time in Australian music history that is unlikely to ever be repeated. A time of blood, sweat and beers. As time moved on, venues have become safer, more polished, mostly cleaner, and dare I say it, boring. Public liability, lockout laws, responsible service of alcohol, all those things have numbed the experience somewhat. But we shouldn't be sad about those times passing. We should be glad they ever existed at all. Now, over the last 40 years, I've been lucky enough to catch Cold Chisel, Jimmy Barnes, Mossy live on many different occasions. But the show I wish I'd been at was at the Bondi Lifesaver on February 29th, 1980. Why should you buy this album? Because if you close your eyes and turn it up loud, preferably with a pair of decent headphones on, it's almost like you're there. Shows like this will never happen again. In fact, Jimmy Barnes is on record last year saying it's very unlikely Cold Chisel will ever tour again. And even if they do, it's likely to be big arena style tours. It's not the same as having Jimmy Barnes sweating over you from the front row. Cold Chisel, live at the Bondi Lifesaver, is out Friday, December 11, 2020, just in time for Christmas, and no Chisel fan should be without this in their collection. It's available on CD and on vinyl, as well as all the usual streaming services. If you'd like a little taster, head on over to Spotify. There's 7 songs available now for you to listen to. If you like this review and you want to see more, hit all the buttons and subscribe. It really helps me out. Appreciate it. If you didn't like it, hit the thumbs down twice and really make your point. If you have an album or a channel you'd like me to review or check out, leave a comment down below and I'm happy to take a look at it. I'm always looking for new material. Now, in a moment, you'll see what YouTube wants you to watch over here and what I'd like you to watch over here. I'm the world's worst musician. You're not. I'll see you on the next one.